Stupid bitch with the mic. That's what Donald Trump muttered. 7 minutes before CNN caught him collapsing on live TV, Jasmine Crockett said nothing. She just unlatched a black leather book missing since 1993. Inside, 12 girls, no names, no photos, just codes. E16, transferred to Palm Beach, vanished. Age 14. Then came page 27. One name, Ivanka Trump, listed not as family but as a companion. And the room forgot how to breathe. No one moved, not the aides, not the cameras, not even Donald Trump. The silence was not absence, it was weight. Jasmine Crockett didn't need to shout. She didn't need to ask for attention. She had already taken it from the room, from the viewers, from history, with a single object, a black leather ledger. Unmarked, cracked at the spine, once thought destroyed in a fire at the Plaza Hotel archives in 1997. Filed as non-recoverable, labeled rumor. And yet, here it was. She placed it on the hearing table like a loaded weapon wrapped in silence. The clasp snapped open with a sound that wasn't loud but a final, not the sound of metal, the sound of something buried too long. Inside were 12 entries, no names, no birth dates, no nationalities, just codes, E15, E16, E17, and stamped next to each, Palm Beach transfer, December 1993. The exact week of Donald Trump's wedding, the exact hotel, the exact floor that had been sealed off for renovations. Jasmine didn't explain. She didn't interpret. She simply opened the book to the first entry and slid it beneath the committee's projection cam. The LED screen lit up behind her, and America saw what she was seeing. Neat cursive initials, date stamps, sweet numbers, and a red marker that circled one entry 3 times. E16. Trump smirked, briefly, then blinked twice. The flicker in his eye wasn't confusion, it was memory. And that was the first crack. Jasmine's voice was soft, almost too soft for a hearing room, but crystal clear for 72 million people watching at home. This ledger, she said, was not meant for guests. It wasn't for hotel staff. It was for internal coordination, security, private detail, entertainment. She turned the page, slowly, as if each motion was timed to a heartbeat. These aren't banquet codes. They aren't staff schedules. They're movement logs. For girls, 12 of them, all transferred from Manhattan to Palm Beach between December 19th and 22nd, 1993. Someone in the back of the room coughed and didn't recover the rhythm of their breath. Jasmine continued, never raising her voice, never looking at Trump. We verified the ink, the paper stock, the pressure indentation on each line. This isn't hearsay, it's handwriting, and it matches 3 known entries from Jeffrey Epstein's private residence logs. Palm Beach, 1993. Trump adjusted his tie. The smirk was gone. One of his lawyers slid a note across the table. He didn't read it. He just stared at Jasmine like someone realizing the exit doors had quietly vanished. This isn't about speculation, Jasmine said. This is about a document that's been missing for 31 years. It's about a list of children who disappeared not from the world, but from every record. She placed a second document under the projection cam. This one bore the heading, Private Coordination, Plaza Hotel, December 1993. Same ink, same codes. But this time, there was a new note beside one entry. E16, escort assigned, VIP floor, departure schedule 12/22. No return log, no return log. A staffer in the hearing room whispered audibly, "Oh my God." It wasn't drama, it was dread. Trump leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, and spoke into the mic with a grin more forced than sincere. Let me get this straight. You're seriously suggesting I orchestrated some kind of trafficking operation at my own wedding? He chuckled. No one else did. Jasmine didn't look at him. Instead, she opened a third page. The lights dimmed slightly as the chamber tech zoomed in. This page was more worn, creased down the middle, but the ink was bold. Entertainment staff, internal use only. Beside it, 12 entries marked with asterisks, no names, just designations. The last entry, E16, status, unlisted departure. Palm Beach. Beside it, code and a code in a different hand, JTR3. Jasmine turned toward Trump for the first time. Her tone was no longer soft. It was surgical. Mr. Trump, if E16 never existed, if none of these girls were real, why did your hotel staff write departure records for them? Why is there a handwritten code next to her name that matches your own staff's internal security system? Trump said nothing. But his hands, folded neatly on the table moments ago, had clenched into fists. And Jasmine wasn't done. She opened to the final page she'd prepared. Not page 1, not page 3, not page 12, page 27. The camera zoomed, the committee leaned in, and across the country people sat forward on their couches. Because the name wasn't coded, it was typed in bold block letters. Ivanka Trump, companion of E15, in assigned seating, VIP table 3, private escort confirmed. The room didn't gasp, it stopped. Trump bolted upright. Shut that down, that's my daughter. She was a child. Jasmine didn't flinch. She was 14, she replied, quiet as snowfall. And yet, not listed as family, not listed as a guest, listed as a companion, and assigned to someone who no longer exists in any known database. Trump pointed, face red now, voice cracking. You don't know what you're saying. She cut him off, not with volume, but with velocity. I know exactly what I'm saying. Page 27 wasn't part of the guest list. It was buried beneath financial filings under your foundation's sealed archive. Someone tried to erase it. They just failed. And for the first time, Donald Trump said nothing, not because he chose silence, but because Jasmine Crockett had just taken even that from him. And the room again forgot how to breathe. The chairman glanced nervously to his left, then right. For a moment, it wasn't clear whether to speak or pray, but Jasmine didn't wait. She turned gently to the clerk's table and nodded once. Madam Chair, a voice crackled over the microphone. The committee now calls its next witness. There was a pause, longer than it needed to be. Then a name, read like a ghost resurfacing. Maria Escobar. A woman stepped through the side door, mid-40s, olive skin, hair pulled into a tight, low bun, no makeup, no entourage. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, not with confidence, but with a rhythm that said, I've carried this weight before. She didn't look at Trump. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked at the table, and the nation held its breath again. She was wearing white, not the pristine white of innocence, but the bruised off-white of memory. She approached the witness seat with no drama, but when she sat, even the microphones seemed to lower themselves out of respect. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with the exhaustion of someone who had held silence too long. Representative Garcia leaned forward. Ms. Escobar, for the record, can you please state your name and your relation to this case? Maria didn't hesitate. My name is Maria Escobar, she said, her voice thin but steady, and I am E16. The chamber cracked. It didn't explode. It cracked, like a frozen lake just before it gives. A ripple of shifting weight moved through the gallery, the press row, the panel. Jasmine looked at her, not with triumph, but with gravity. She knew what was about to come wasn't testimony. It was history bleeding into daylight. I was 16 years old, Maria continued. They told me I'd be serving drinks at a private wedding. They said it would be easy money. One night, Manhattan, no experience needed. Her eyes flicked up to the committee. But there were no trays, no uniforms, no briefing, just 10 girls, all of us in white dresses we didn't own, told to smile and stand near the men with cameras. Trump shifted in his chair, visibly recoiling. But Maria kept going, her voice gathering weight like a river finding its current. They brought us in through a service elevator. We never saw the ballroom. We were taken straight to the third floor, VIP wing. No IDs, no questions, just hands on our shoulders and doors that locked from the outside. Someone in the back sobbed. Maria didn't blink. I remember the suite, gold-framed mirrors, red velvet chairs, A bar cart with untouched champagne. It looked like a showroom, not a hotel room. Too perfect, too silent. Then she said it. He was there, Donald Trump, laughing, holding a glass, standing beside Epstein like they were the ones getting married. Trump bolted forward. "I don't know this woman," he barked. "Never met her in my life." The chairman pounded the gavel once, but it was Maria's reply that silenced him more than any strike of wood. She turned toward him slowly, locked eyes, and said, "But I remember your cologne." 3 seconds passed, then 5, then 10, and no one dared inhale. Maria continued unshaken. "You stood 6 feet from me. You lifted your glass. You said, 'Smile, sweetheart.' Epstein likes the quiet ones." Her voice didn't crack, but the floor beneath the chamber seemed to shift. "I remember the chandelier. I remember the smell of the room, money and sweat. And I remember a girl named Amira. She cried when the photographer told her to step aside. They took her into another room. She never came back." A press reporter dropped her pen. Maria looked down at her hands. "They called it VIP service. They told us it was just for show. But when the party ended, I wasn't sent home. I was taken downstairs. A man in a black suit put me in a car with tinted windows. No questions, just a folder on the seat beside me, and a whisper in the driver's ear, 'Palm Beach, no stops.'" Jasmine leaned forward quietly, like asking a wounded animal permission to breathe near it. "Miss Escobar, are you saying you were transported across state lines under a false identity at age 16? Maria nodded. "They called me E16. I wasn't on any guest list. I wasn't a waitress. I was a child. And I was never supposed to be remembered." Trump slammed his hand on the table. "This is fiction. This is disgusting." His face was red, lips tight. "She's an actress, a liar." But Jasmine didn't look at him. She looked at Maria and softly asked, "Do you have proof?" Maria reached down, unzipped a leather pouch, and pulled out a folded sheet, yellowed with age, torn at one edge. She unfolded it with gloved hands and slid it to the clerk. It read, "Escort log, December 22, 1993. Transfer, E16. Departure, Manhattan. Arrival, Palm Beach. Time, 02:43 a.m. Stamped at the bottom, confirmed. Mar-a-Lago security entry." Initials JT. Trump went still. Even the air stopped moving. Maria's final words cut deeper than any courtroom transcript. "You forgot me," she said, "but my body didn't. My silence didn't. The ink didn't." And for the first time since entering the room, she smiled. Not for him, not for the cameras, but because ghosts don't haunt. They testify. Before the echo of her final word had faded, Jasmine Crockett's eyes shifted. Not to Trump, not to Maria, but toward the side door. A quiet signal. The room responded like a synchronized breath. Everyone turned, waiting. Then came the name that turned posture into stillness. Gregory Finch. He entered like time itself had slowed to let him through. A man in his late 60s, suit modest, pressed, but faded at the collar. His frame was thin, but not frail. His eyes, gray, steady, carried 30 years of knowing too much and saying nothing. He held a leather-bound folio to his chest with both hands like something sacred and radioactive. He didn't sit right away. He scanned the chamber, then looked directly at Trump. Trump didn't blink. "Mr. Finch," the chairman said, clearing his throat, "please state your name and your role in the events of December '93. "My name is Gregory Finch," he began, voice low but crisp. "I was the official photographer for the Trump Maples wedding at the Plaza Hotel. I was contracted by the coordination team, not the family. I was paid in full 2 weeks before the ceremony, no instructions, no edits, just delivery." He placed the folio on the table. The click of the leather against wood echoed louder than it should have. "I brought what you didn't see," he said. "What no one was supposed to see." He opened the first flap. Inside were plastic sleeves filled with photos, being unpublished, unprocessed in the digital age. The first one he slid under the document camera was soft in focus, but devastating in clarity. A row of girls dressed in white, standing shoulder to shoulder in the back of the ballroom. No corsages, no name tags, no family near them. One girl, dead center, had been circled in red ink. E16. Gasps rippled. Jasmine didn't speak. She didn't need to. The image was louder than words. Finch turned the next page. This photo, he said, was taken at 9:41 p.m. I was told to photograph every guest, every table, every VIP, but these girls weren't on the guest list. They weren't seated. They were lined up, framed, posed. Jasmine leaned in. Mr. Finch, who asked you to photograph them? Finch paused. I didn't recognize the man. He wasn't Trump's staff. He wasn't from the bridal team. But he wore a pin I've seen before in photos with Epstein. A silver falcon, right lapel. He said the girls were part of the entertainment portfolio. Told me to shoot from the waist up. Full light, no shadows. He slid the next photo under the camera. A close-up. Girls staring off camera, arms stiff behind their backs. Trump shifted in his seat, lips parting, but words not forming. Finch continued. Later that night, I was called to the VIP suite on the third floor to pick up some gear I'd left behind. It was quiet. The hallway was empty, but when I stepped inside, he pulled out a different photo. This one wasn't of people. It was of a mirror, velvet-draped suite, champagne bucket, a crystal ashtray, and in the upper right corner of the mirror, a single black dot. The room tensed. That's not dust, Finch said. That's a pinhole camera. I've seen those in Atlantic City hotels. Hidden surveillance built into the mirror frame facing the bed. A wave of dread swept through the chamber. Jasmine narrowed her eyes. Did you report this, Mr. Finch? Finch's hands clenched slightly, then relaxed. Back then, no one would have listened. Epstein was just a financier. Trump was already a brand. I was a contractor with a camera and a conscience. One of them would have buried me. The other would have trademarked it. He pulled out a final image. It was Donald Trump, frozen mid-toast, glass raised, eyes locked on something out of frame. And behind him, partially obscured but unmistakable, the same row of girls, the same dresses, the same stiff smiles. One of them looking directly at the camera, terrified. I was instructed, Finch said, not to deliver these to the bride, not even to Trump. I was told to hand them off to a courier from Epstein's office. He pointed to the red wax stamp on the envelope that held the negatives. Jasmine's voice was low, surgical. Did they pay you extra, Mr. Finch? He nodded. $5,000 in cash, under the table, to forget what I saw, to pretend these were proofs that didn't meet print quality. I kept the real ones, just in case someone, like her, he gestured to Maria, ever had the courage to speak. Trump burst out. He's lying. He's a fraud. This is all orchestrated. But no one moved because the images didn't lie. And Gregory Finch had waited 31 years for someone to finally ask. The room didn't recover. It just braced itself. Because what came next wasn't testimony. It wasn't a statement or a photo or a memory. It was a recording, a relic, a reel pulled from a vault no one knew existed, one that had traveled 3 decades in the dark, waiting to be seen. Jasmine Crockett stood without announcement, holding a thin plastic case marked in faded handwriting. Tam 3, VIP East, Deck 19, 1993. Her gloves were white. The silence was heavier than before. This, she said softly, was recovered last month from a private storage facility in Yonkers. Labeled under equipment rentals, the device inside was non-digital, analog only. A technician risked federal breach to convert it safely for today's hearing. Trump scoffed. You expect anyone to believe some mysterious tape shows up now? This is a setup. But his voice cracked, slightly. Jasmine didn't even look at him. She turned to the technician. You may begin playback. The lights dimmed. The monitor on the wall flickered. static, then black, then a moment of nothing so quiet, so blank, that some believed it was fake. Then it began. Soft music, a ballroom glittering in gold, guests in tuxedos and gowns, waiters floating like shadows. And in the middle, Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, champagne flutes in hand, arms draped casually over each other's shoulders like kings at a feast. Trump was mid-laugh. Epstein leaned in. And though the mic quality was grainy, the words were unmistakable. Palm Beach is going to love her. Trump lifted his glass and replied, "Already told my guy. Flight's on Monday." In the room, a congressional staffer dropped her pen. No one picked it up. On the screen, the camera, hidden behind a mirrored panel, tilted ever so slightly. Whether by design or chance, its new angle framed something the world wasn't ready for. A girl, white dress, shoulders bare, arms pressed tight against her sides. She wasn't dancing, she wasn't laughing. She was standing near the far wall, still, silent, watching the crowd the way prey watches a storm. Epstein looked toward her. Trump followed his gaze. He handed off his drink, straightened his jacket, and stepped into frame. Slowly, like he'd done it before. He crouched down, one knee, not out of politeness, but calculation. Leaned in close, whispered something into her ear. She flinched. Her mouth didn't move, but her eyes did. They went hollow. And then Trump smiled, the kind of smile reserved for closed doors and sealed courtrooms. The kind that makes ghosts. The chamber erupted, not in noise, but in stillness so total it felt like the oxygen had left the room. Trump shot up from his chair. "This is doctored. CGI, it's fake." He pointed at the screen. His voice no longer thundered, it pleaded. "She could be anyone. I wasn't even in that room." Jasmine didn't flinch. She lifted the remote from her table and calmly paused the video. She zoomed in, frame by frame. The camera stopped on one image. Trump, inches from the girl's shoulder. Hand placed lightly across her upper back. His fingers splayed, resting on bare skin. His mouth caught mid-sentence. Jasmine's voice when it came was calm. Icy. "Is that fake too, Mr. Trump?" He didn't answer. The image remained frozen behind her. A still life of power and silence, and something no courtroom had ever been willing to name. For 5 full seconds, no one moved. Then Jasmine continued. "This footage was time-stamped at 10:17 p.m., same night, same suite. The same suite documented in the ledger we entered as evidence. The same girl circled in Finch's photograph. The same code, E16. The lights in the chamber seemed dimmer now. Not electronically, but morally. Like history itself had shadowed the room. We ran biometric analysis," she added. Her facial features matched Maria Escobar at age 16, within a 96% confidence threshold. Same build, same eye spacing, same trauma, apparently. Trump was shaking his head, almost rhythmically. His lips mouthed words, but none formed. The technician stood by, awaiting instruction. Jasmine nodded once, resumed playback. The tape continued. On screen, the girl was being led away, not by force, but with a hand guiding the small of her back. A woman in black, staff, no expression. She whispered something and the girl walked, slow, stiff, to a side door. Then the screen went dark. One line of white text appeared. Camera feed interrupted. Then silence. The tape stopped. Trump was already out of his seat. "This is illegal. It was buried for a reason. That's stolen private footage." He was shouting now, words falling over each other like a man losing his footing. But Jasmine stood still. "I agree," she said. "It was buried for a reason. That reason was her." She turned toward the chairman, her voice firm, rising now, not in volume but in weight. "There is no political agenda here. There is no theatrical vendetta. There is only one question left." She turned back to Trump. "What happens when the cameras catch the truth and you're the one standing in it?" He didn't respond because there was nothing left to say. The images had spoken. And this time, they didn't blink. Jasmine Crockett let the silence stretch a moment longer. enough for the weight of what had just been seen to settle into the bones of everyone watching. Then, with a breath so steady it sounded rehearsed, she reached for the black ledger once more. She didn't flip quickly. She turned each page with rigor, deliberately, like she was walking barefoot through a graveyard. Each turn thudded softly against the wood of the table, like a countdown ticking towards something no one wanted to believe was coming. Then she stopped. "Page 27, she said calmly, and the entire chamber leaned forward, consciously or not. She slid the page under the projection camera. The screen behind her came to life, and there it was, typed in bold, unambiguous letters, Ivanka Trump underneath. Companion of E15, escort confirmed, table 3, private access. Yes, the air shifted, not exploded, shifted like a building groaning under the weight of its own denial. Donald Trump's chair creaked as he surged forward, voice raw, cracked with disbelief. "She was a child," he shouted. 14 years old. My daughter." Jasmine didn't raise her voice, didn't change her tone. She simply looked up, made brief eye contact, and said with devastating precision, "Yes, she was 14 and still listed under escort services." The phrase dropped into the room like an iron verdict. There was no echo, just stillness and the gentle hum of monitors transmitting those words to millions of homes across America. Trump looked like he wanted to respond, but no words came. He pressed his hand to his chest, not in pain, but in disbelief, as if he expected the page to vanish if he stared hard enough. Jasmine continued, her voice even, emotionless on the surface but cutting deep underneath. "The name of Ivanka Trump appears nowhere in the official guest list. Not in the family table registry, not in the public seating chart, not even in the press packet given to reporters the night of the wedding. But it appears here on page 27 of the internal coordination ledger. Not as a guest, not as family, as a companion." She tapped the screen gently, drawing attention to the line marked "Escort Confirmed." Then she turned a second document over, a logistics log tied to table 3, matching the code assigned to E15. E15, as previously shown, is one of the 12 unidentified minors marked for transfer post-event. And the records here indicate a table pairing logged by internal staff. Ivanka Trump, age 14, assigned to sit with her. Jasmine paused. Not coincidentally, not accidentally, but as part of a coordinated designation. Across the press row, fingers froze over keyboards. A congressional aide leaned forward and whispered something inaudible to a colleague. On social media, the page began circulating in real time. Someone had already screenshotted the monitor. Someone else had posted it with one line. She wasn't just his daughter, she was a detail. Trump muttered something under his breath. Then louder. "That page wasn't supposed to be in there. It wasn't real." You said Jasmine didn't move. She merely flipped to the edge of the document and showed a notation stamped in archival red, filed under TTF FND 421A. She turned to the committee. "For the record, this archive ID matches a subset of documents stored under the Trump Foundation's 1994 amended filings, now unsealed under subpoena." She looked back at Trump. "You didn't just forget this page. You buried it." Trump opened his mouth again, then stopped. His legal team remained silent. 2 aides beside him stared at the table, their pens frozen midair. Jasmine leaned slightly forward, letting the silence wrap itself around her next words like coiled steel. "You say she was a child, Mr. Trump. I agree. That's what makes this entry all the more horrifying. Because even a child wasn't exempt from the system you constructed. Not protected by proximity, only positioned." He didn't yell again. His shoulders slumped slightly. His eyes flicked toward the screen, then quickly away. For a man who'd made his fortune on headlines, he suddenly couldn't bear to read one. The chairman shifted in his seat, visibly shaken. Jasmine wasn't finished. "This page was never meant to be indexed," she said. "It was buried behind a falsified expense sheet marked Event Photography Duplicate. It took forensic document recovery and 3 separate court orders to locate it. And even then, she held up a secondary slip of paper. It had been filed under an unrelated trust, a trust in Ivanka Trump's name. She let that land. Then finally, she stepped back from the mic and allowed the silence to do what it had always done best, reveal the weight of what no one wanted to carry. The screen behind her still glowed. Ivanka Trump, companion of E15. No one said a word, because no one could. The ledger had spoken again, and this time it whispered her name. The silence stretched, a silence so loud it became a sound in itself. Then a shuffle, soft, deliberate. From the third row of reserved seats, an older woman stood. She didn't look like a whistleblower, no microphone, no legal pad, no team of attorneys beside her, just a gray tailored blazer, loose curls pinned back, and a single envelope in her left hand. Jasmine Crockett turned to the chairman and gave a subtle nod. "She's been waiting since 1997 to speak," Jasmine said. "She won't be using a microphone." The woman walked forward, no drama, no plea, just years held in her lungs. Her name was Meredith Hale, former assistant to senior casting directors at Victoria's Secret under L. Brands. She approached the witness table without ceremony, placed the envelope down, and slid it forward with one hand. Her eyes never left Donald Trump. Jasmine opened the envelope slowly, revealing a tri-folded sheet of yellowed memo paper, handwritten, scanned, and notarized. "This document," Jasmine began, "was written on May 12, 1996. It is a handwritten note from then-casting assistant Meredith Hale to her direct superior, filed internally and flagged private, non-distributable. It contains an excerpt from a verbal exchange that occurred during a catalog review session between Ms. Hale's team and a private client." She turned the page so the screen caught every letter. Midway down, underlined twice, was a line that pulled the air from the room. "Do they do private work or just runway?" "Donald J. Trump," someone audibly gasped. A woman in the gallery grabbed her chest. An aide dropped a pen. Jasmine continued, her voice like glass slicing through fog. "The they refers to a set of underage model profiles presented in a pre-catalog selection binder. These were girls ages 15 to 17, pulled from Eastern Europe and Latin America. Most did not speak fluent English. They were being considered for junior holiday print." She paused. Mr. Trump was not on the approved client list for that session. He arrived unannounced, requested the folder, and left that remark before exiting. Trump looked like a man untethered from time. His hands twitched at the table, reaching for something that wasn't there. His mouth opened, then flattened shut. Jasmine pointed back to the document. Ms. Hale was told to shred the note. Instead, she sent a copy to herself through a blind postbox in Connecticut. She kept it sealed for 29 years. She came forward only after seeing the ledger's page 27. Jasmine stepped aside as Meredith Hale, still silent, pulled a second document from her coat. A visitor log from L. Brands HQ, Trump's name. Time in 2:43 p.m. Time out 2:58 p.m. Logged by front desk. Dated the same day. Jasmine placed it beside the quote. No cameras, no press, no approval, but the record survived. Trump leaned into his mic, rage boiling again. "This is ridiculous. She's lying. That quote doesn't prove anything." Jasmine turned to him, calm as water before a storm. "Do you deny being there?" "I don't remember. It was, 20 years ago?" She didn't blink. "Do you deny asking that question?" It doesn't mean what you think it means." "Then tell us," she said, voice quiet now. "What did it mean?" Silence. She tapped the document once, gently, precisely. This wasn't said in a nightclub, not whispered at a party. It was spoken during a review of minors being evaluated for commercial exposure. And you asked, out loud, if they did private work. Not modeling, not runway, private work. She turned to the gallery. "I don't care what your political leanings are, or how much money you have donated. If you read that quote, and your first instinct is to explain it away, then you're not listening. You're protecting the very sickness this hearing is here to expose. Trump sat back in his chair, eyes blank, jaw clenched. But Meredith Hale wasn't done. She reached into her blazer pocket and removed a phone. Locked, old, worn. She slid it across the table. Jasmine picked it up and turned it toward the camera. One message, auto-forwarded on June 3rd this year. Retract or vanish. You know what happened to C? Jasmine turned back to the audience. Ms. Hale received that message 48 hours after requesting to testify. And then she finally spoke. Her voice was soft, shaken, but strong. My best friend Cassandra blew the whistle in '98. She disappeared 6 months later. I wasn't brave then. She looked at Trump. But I'm still here. The room didn't move, because now the silence belonged to him. She looked at Trump. But I'm still here. The room didn't move, because now the silence belonged to him. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't ready to let him rest in it. She turned toward the chairman, opened a separate case folder on her desk, and removed 4 manila envelopes, each stamped with legal filing dates. Her voice didn't rise. It deepened, anchored by the weight of what came next. These are non-disclosure agreements, and she said, executed within 60 days of the Trump-Maples wedding. One by one, she placed them under the projector. Each bore a signature. Each had a corresponding file code from the Trump Organization's internal legal department, and each contained the same clause, verbatim across every contract. She pointed to the section. Clause 6B, she read aloud. Quote, all images, recordings, or references involving special guests, physical or electronic, must be destroyed within 24 months of the event. No reproductions, no exceptions, non-compliance voids indemnity. She looked up. 4 NDAs, 4 different people, all signed within 2 months of each other, all regarding one event. Trump shifted in his seat, lips twitching, eyes darting from monitor to table to camera. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Jasmine flipped to the signature pages. Subject 1, a catering manager. Subject 2, a floral contractor. Subject 3, a private security consultant. Then the 4th. Subject 4, Gregory Finch. The courtroom inhaled sharply. Even the microphones caught the ripple of collective realization. Finch, seated behind the railing, stood slowly, his jaw clenched. Eyes locked on the image of his own signature. Jasmine turned to him gently. Is this your signature, Mr. Finch? He nodded once. Yes. Were you aware at the time that Section 6B required you to destroy all visual documentation of the event? I was. And yet, she reached below her binder and raised the sealed envelope he had previously delivered during testimony. You retained over 300 stills and 41 negatives. Finch straightened. His voice was low, steady, defiant. I'd rather be sued than be silent. The sentence echoed, not shouted, just etched. Jasmine didn't look away. Why? Finch exhaled through his nose. Because it wasn't a wedding. It was a parade of shadows. We weren't preserving memories. We were erasing them. They told us to smile for history and burn the truth behind it. He looked at Trump now. But some images burn back. Trump slammed his fist on the desk. You signed that willingly. You were paid. Finch stared at him. I was paid to shoot, not to forget. Jasmine let the moment settle, then continued. These NDAs weren't about protecting privacy. They were machines. Machines designed to shred time, erase context, and weaponize silence. Clause 6B didn't just target footage, it targeted memory. She flipped to a 5th document. This one never got signed. She held it up. Photographer number 2, assigned to the bridal preparation suite, walked off the job the morning of the wedding, claimed there were unusual instructions. Quote, avoid capturing minors in reflective surfaces. Remove any shots that include Table 3 unless pre-approved by Mr. Epstein. The courtroom shifted again. His name was Jacob Verne. He vanished from industry records 3 months later. Jasmine closed the folder and looked up. These NDAs weren't normal. They weren't about brand protection. They were about containment. Trump leaned into the mic. NDAs are legal. Everyone uses them. You think Obama never signed one? Clinton? Jasmine stepped forward. Mr. Trump, there's a difference between privacy and premeditation. These weren't to protect reputations. They were to obliterate traces. She turned back to Finch. One final question, Mr. Finch. Did anyone ever follow up, ask whether you'd complied with the clause? He nodded. 2 years later, a man in a black coat showed up, asked if any archival material remained, said it was a routine check. And your answer? Finch smiled faintly, but it wasn't warm. I told him I'd lost everything in a flood. Jasmine paused, then whispered, You didn't. He shook his head. No, I saved it all. Not for justice, not for revenge. Just in case the silence ever ended. And now it had. Jasmine Crockett didn't speak. She simply turned toward the technician at the media station and gave a nod. The screen behind her flickered. A title card appeared. Cam 3, Sweet Mirror. Source, Finch Archives. Timestamp 12/19/1993, 5:42 p.m. It was grainy, not HD, not dramatic. Just cold, fixed surveillance, angled from the corner of a vanity mirror inside the VIP suite. The camera must have been tucked behind a frame or embedded in the molding. There was no audio at first, just the sterile hum of old videotape. Then movement. 2 figures entered frame, Trump and Epstein. They were laughing. Trump clinked a crystal glass against Epstein's, the audio kicking in mid-sentence. Palm Beach is gonna love her. Laughter again. Then the door opened. A girl stepped in, small, shoulders tense. A white ribbon hung lopsided in her hair. She froze just inside the frame, silent, shaking. Trump walked toward her. The room behind Jasmine went still, tighter than oxygen could allow. Then he knelt slightly, leaning in, whispering, Don't worry, sweetheart. You'll like Florida. The screen cut to black, static, then a red system overlay. Connection interrupted. Feed disconnected. Jasmine looked back at the technician. He stared at the monitors, pale. We've lost the stream. Every feed, not just ours. C-SPAN, CNN, MSNBC, they're all down. Emergency protocol? She asked. He nodded. Simultaneous cut. External override. Never seen anything like it. The chamber erupted. Reporters screamed into dead microphones. Staffers scrambled. Committee members yelled for backup signals, alternate servers, air-gapped drives, anything. But it was too late. The tape had already lit the fuse. Because even before the feed had gone black, even before the networks dropped their streams, millions were watching. And millions were recording. Phones, screens, mirror apps, backup caches, auto-syncing platforms. It didn't matter what went down. The truth went up. Within 47 seconds, the clip hit Twitter. By minute 2, it was on Reddit. By minute 4, TikTok had dissected it frame by frame. Hashtags ignited. Hash Sweetheart Florida, Nestart E16, Shash Cam 3 Mirror, Shash Silence, has eyes. The quote became a rallying cry. Don't worry, sweetheart. It wasn't just a line, it was an indictment. People knew what it meant, and they knew who it was meant for. In the hearing chamber, Jasmine stood motionless. Someone handed her a tablet, stream cuts confirmed. Network lawyers had gone silent. Even social media reps pulled back statements. But Jasmine smiled, because the people didn't wait for permission. They already saw. Trump's face was pale. He knew it too. The networks may have blinked, but America didn't. Because in a world built on NDAs, edits, denials, and sealed ledgers, raw footage was a revolution. Jasmine stepped back to the microphone. Her voice was low, like reading an obituary. There was a time when footage could be erased, buried, sealed. She held up the image, freeze from the last clear frame, his hand on the girl's shoulder, mid-whisper. That time is over. Trump tried to stand, but his knees buckled. An aide caught his arm. He wasn't fainting. He was drowning. Drowning in a truth that no longer needed a courtroom to exist. It lived in pixels now, in frames, in hashtags, in people who refused to look away. Jasmine said one final line before yielding the floor. Truth doesn't need a broadcast license. It only needs one eye and one screen. And this time, not even power could unplug the reckoning. The reckoning had arrived, but it hadn't come alone. As murmurs rippled across the chamber, the world recalibrated around one singular truth. No more secrets, not in ink, not on tape, not behind mirrors. The floodgates had cracked, leaving power, finally, where it belonged, on trial. Jasmine Crockett gathered her documents, prepared to call the next witness. Maria Escobar was already waiting. She walked slowly to the chair, not with hesitation, but with the calm steadiness of someone who had already died once and decided this time she'd do it in daylight. The court clerk asked her to state her name. She did, and then something happened. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just a vibration. From her coat pocket, Maria's phone lit up. She glanced down instinctively. Her expression didn't change, but her breathing did. Jasmine saw it. One flicker, barely noticeable, like a ghost passed through her rib cage. Ms. Escobar? The chairman asked gently. Maria didn't speak. She turned the phone around, held it up. The screen displayed a single message, black text, white background, no sender, no timestamp, just 5 words. Retract or vanish. Your choice. Gasps ripped through the chamber. The cameras caught everything, zooming in on the screen. Viewers at home didn't need commentators. They didn't need fact-checkers. They saw it live. The networks hadn't cut the feed this time. They couldn't, because this wasn't surveillance footage. This wasn't preloaded evidence. This was real-time intimidation, broadcast into millions of living rooms. Maria placed the phone on the witness table, screen still glowing. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than before, but heavier. I was 16 when I stopped breathing, she said. Not physically, spiritually. And this right here, she pointed to the message. This is the hand that held my throat for 30 years. Jasmine stood before the mic, stone still. Is there any doubt in your mind, she asked, that this message is tied to your testimony? Maria didn't flinch. There's no doubt. They never cared if we were believed. They only ever cared if we were quiet. The chairman fumbled for his gavel. We're suspending. No, Jasmine interrupted. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the marble like thunder. I move for immediate federal protection for Miss Escobar, and for any whistleblower, survivor, or staffer who has testified or is scheduled to do so. I move that we recognize this not as a threat to one witness, but as a national signal. She turned fully to face the camera. If they're threatening her, they're warning all of us. The words didn't echo. They ignited. Within seconds, the hearing room transformed from testimony to history. Federal marshals entered the room. 2 flanked Maria, 1 secured the phone. A 4th whispered directly to Jasmine. She nodded once. Across social media, the message had already gone viral. Had retract or vanish. They just proved her right. Protect Maria. But another trend emerged too, not born of fear, but defiance. We don't retract. Outside the Capitol, crowds had already begun to form. Screens lit up with the moment the message appeared, replayed on loop. Not to sensationalize, but to remember. The threat wasn't just a whisper in the shadows anymore. It was public policy. Jasmine turned back to Maria. You don't have to keep going, she said softly. Maria looked her dead in the eye. I stopped speaking when I was 16. I'm 47 now. I've waited longer than they think I'd survive. Then she leaned into the mic. And I'm not done yet. Trump didn't speak. His team whispered behind him, faces ashen. Legal counsel was making calls. But no one could spin what had just happened, because even the threat had failed. Not because it wasn't terrifying, but because it had been seen. Jasmine closed the file before her, calm, measured. The attempt to erase truth has now committed its own signature. She paused, and in doing so, it became part of the record. Then she did something no one expected. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't present a new exhibit. She didn't play a video or hold up a photo or call another witness. She simply reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a single sheet of white paper, creased in half, slightly worn at the corners, like it had been folded and unfolded too many times to count. She didn't announce it. She didn't explain. She just stood and began to read. Ana Morales. Silence. Bell Takahashi. The gallery inhaled, shallow, broken. Charlotte Rowe. No reactions from the committee, no objections from counsel. Not even Trump moved. Danica Yilmaz. Amelia Santos. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't falter. She read like each name was a bell, and she was striking it. Farrah Monroe. Grace Yoon. Helena Duarte. Isabel Chen. Jenny Vasquez. Caitlin Miles. And finally, Lily Devereaux. 12 names, 12 ghosts no longer willing to be forgotten, 12 funeral bells rung in sequence, not to bury them again, but to resurrect them. For a long, unscripted moment, no one said a word. And then from somewhere across the country, thousands of miles from the Capitol building, in a modest kitchen in rural Indiana, a woman dropped her coffee mug. It shattered. Her hands covered her mouth before her heart could. Tears streamed silently. "That's my daughter," she whispered. "Oh my God, that's my daughter." She wasn't watching C-SPAN for politics. She was watching because someone had told her to tune in, because her daughter had disappeared in 1994. They'd said she ran away. They'd said there were no leads. They'd said eventually that there was nothing left to find. But now her name, Caitlin Miles, had just been spoken on the floor of Congress. Not in suspicion, not in speculation, but as recorded fact. Back in the chamber, Jasmine folded the paper and placed it on the table in front of her. She looked straight ahead. No drama, no applause, no commentary. Trump's face was unreadable. His lawyers whispered furiously beside him, but he didn't hear them. Because those names, those 12 syllables of unfinished childhood, had just undone decades of calculated silence. Jasmine stepped forward. "I offer no theories, no accusations, no conclusions." She looked out at the sea of faces, some angry, some devastated, many just holding their breath. "I offer only what was never meant to be remembered." She placed the folded page into the official record file, and now cannot be forgotten. The chairman whispered something to a clerk. Security tightened. The room buzzed, not loudly, but like a frequency had shifted and no one's body could recalibrate fast enough. Outside, the air changed. In front of screens across the country, parents began searching for old photos, journals, missing posters, hospital records, phone bills, because somewhere in those 12 names were 100 echoes, and America had just learned how to hear them. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't finished. She let the silence breathe. She let it settle in the bones of every person in that room, the way cold seeps into wood and doesn't ask permission to stay. Then, without fanfare, she reached for the microphone again. No papers this time, no evidence bags, no witness, just one question. Soft, precise, surgical. "What happens when we find the footage? Not if, when, not can we handle it. What will we do?" The room did not stir. Trump didn't speak. His lawyers didn't scramble. Even the reporters didn't type. Because the question wasn't rhetorical. It wasn't dramatic. It was inevitable. And no one, not even the most powerful man in the world, had an answer ready. She continued, "You've seen what they tried to erase. You've heard from the people who were never supposed to outlive the silence. You've seen the ledger. You've seen the tape. You've heard the names." She took one step forward. But what happens when the rest of the mirror is recovered? What happens when the missing reels resurface? When the archives cough up what power thought it buried beneath NDAs and vaults and court seals? She looked directly at the chairman. At what point does this stop being a hearing and start becoming a reckoning? The chairman's lips parted, but it was not he who answered. A clerk leaned into his side, whispered something. He nodded gravely, then lifted the small walnut gavel before him and struck it once, not in anger, not in closure, but in recognition. I am hereby moving, and he said, that this committee recommends to the full House an official federal investigation into the contents of the 1993 ledger, the financial and personal ties between Mr. Donald J. Trump and Mr. Jeffrey Epstein, and all associated footage, sealed materials, and suppressed witness reports from the time in question. He turned to Jasmine. You've presented evidence that moves beyond reasonable doubt, and now we must move beyond delay. Gasps, applause, then something else. Movement. From the side entrance of the hearing room, a line of agents entered, not security this time, but representatives from the Department of Justice. Subtle, efficient, unmistakable. They weren't here to speak. They were here to watch, because an investigation wasn't coming. It had already begun. On social media, the question had already gone viral. What happens when we find the footage? It was being spray painted across protest banners, printed on T-shirts, echoed in hashtags. We will find it, the tape still exists, reckoning is footage. And in that moment, it wasn't about politics. It wasn't about left or right. It was about a country staring into its own reflection and asking whether it could handle what it had chosen not to see for decades. Trump sat slumped, not defeated, but known. And there are few punishments harsher in history than being finally, fully known. Jasmine didn't need to smile. She didn't need to gloat. She simply stepped away from the mic because the truth had just asked its own question. And no one could unhear it. Not the press, not the public, and certainly not the man sitting alone at the center table, clutching the edge like it might save him from the weight of everything he'd built. Donald J. Trump. The room shifted, but he didn't, not at first. Then he spoke. This is a goddamn circus, he spat. A disgrace, a political witch hunt led by a woman who should be in jail. He turned to Jasmine, voice rising like a man screaming at a storm. You're nothing, a pathetic little... She didn't blink. She didn't answer. Because she didn't need to. Behind her, a screen lit up one last time. The final clip. KM7, Private Back Terrace, June 1993. It began silently. A party at dusk, soft music, guests moving like shadows. Trump in a white dinner jacket. Epstein beside him. Laughter. Clinking glasses. And then, frame by frame, it zoomed, focused on Trump, pointing toward a girl, small, fragile, no older than 13, white dress, frozen. He leaned into Epstein. His lips moved, the audio crackled, then sharpened. Already arranged. That's all, 2 words, but they hit like a hammer on cathedral glass. Trump surged to his feet, knocking the chair over. Fake! It's all fake! His voice cracked. Raspy, dry, unanchored. You think I planned this? You think I don't even... His breath hitched. One hand grabbed his chest, the other the edge of the table, eyes wide. He tried to speak, but the words didn't come. Only the wheezing, a slow, dreadful collapse began. Not sudden, but deliberate, like gravity was claiming him back inch by inch. Jasmine didn't move. No one did. Because what they were witnessing wasn't just physical. It was collapse in every dimension. He stumbled. Backwards. One step, then another. The silence now wasn't respect. It was reverence. For the ending of something once believed too powerful to end. He tried to steady himself on the railing. Missed, and in front of 102 million viewers watching across the world, Donald Trump fell, back, hard, unforgiving, on marble, and the camera didn't cut. Not because it couldn't, but because in that moment, there was nothing left to edit. Security rushed in, medics, panic swirled, aides yelled for oxygen, someone cried for a doctor. A microphone hit the floor, static buzzing like a mechanical heartbeat. But it was too late, not for life, but for legacy. America didn't witness the destruction of a man. It witnessed the implosion of a myth, the undoing of decades of manipulation. Not in fire, not in handcuffs, but in truth. Pure, undeniable, unstoppable. Jasmine turned, facing the chamber one last time. She didn't gloat, but her silence spoke louder than any verdict. Because sometimes, justice doesn't need to strike. It only needs to withstand. And this time, it did. Truth doesn't shout. It endures. In ledgers, in photographs, in the ache of those still waiting to be heard. Justice is not always loud nor swift, but when it arrives, it does not ask for permission. It simply reveals. And when the silence breaks, what matters most is not who falls, but who dares to finally stand. If this story made you pause, don't look away. Let it linger. Let it disturb. Let it move something honest inside you. Like, comment, and share it with someone who still believes the names of the forgotten deserve to be spoken. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where truth isn't sanitized and silence doesn't get the final word. Hit the bell because the next chapter is darker, braver, and closer than you think. This is a fictional dramatization, woven from echoes of injustice, stitched with threads of courage. Any resemblance to real people or events is unintentional or intentionally symbolic for the sake of public reckoning. Thanks for watching. Justice doesn't whisper. It waits until someone listens. This is Harrison Stories.